Hey there. I bet you've been to many an IEP meeting, or if you're in Texas, an ARD meeting, where there were a few red flags. And sometimes these red flags come when we hear some statement at the IEP meeting, and it's like, I don't think that's right. And yet it's like, what do I say? So today's show is dedicated to what do you say when? And I have some common statements that I've heard at IEP meetings as a parent and as an advocate. And I want you to type in the comments statements that you've heard and if you want some ideas for a response, or the other thing is you probably have some great responses that you can share with us. So this is interactive. I have some examples, but let's get the conversation started. If you don't know me, I am Charmaine Tanner. I'm a parent, a retired teacher, and I do advocacy full time now for families across the country. So it's pretty exciting work. Never a dull moment, right? And we have this weekly Facebook Live show. And today we are talking about those kinds of statements that you hear and you're not quite sure how to respond. So, welcome. Let us know what you're thinking. Um, we will get started with some examples. So let me see here. It's like, what do I do? What do I do? One of the things I've heard at IEP meetings is we don't need to write it in the IEP. Our teachers will remember to do this. So, have you ever heard something like that before? Hey, Courtney. Um, So, Courtney, yes, great. That we'll get to that next. I love it. I love it. So, it really is important that I think you probably all know Pete Wright's response, right? If it's not in writing, it didn't happen. And so, this could be a question that you could ask. So, if it's not written in the IEP, will the district still be held accountable for providing it? Now, depending on the inflection and the tone that you use, this can, we want it to somehow be positive that we want to continue the conversation, right? So, this is interesting because to me, sometimes it's helpful to, put the onus back on the district for them to be able to defend what they're saying. And this question points out to the district that you are a savvy advocate. You know that things have to be in writing in order for people to be accountable. There's another response that you might use, and this is a little more assertive. And depending on the situation, sometimes we have to be more assertive, right? So you could say, I'm requesting it be written in my child's IEP. If you are declining my request, please write your reasons and the prior written notice. Um, and I remember, Natalie, I don't know if you're watching, but going to some IEP meetings where the special ed teacher was like so abrupt, so like just closing everything down. And I would probably say, I don't know, at least a half a dozen times during the meeting, please include that in your prior written notice, because it was like, we want to keep people accountable for what they say and what their positions are at IEP meetings. So, hey, Renee. Renee is here from the Chicago area. And Courtney's here. Abby. Yes, I love it. So, Courtney, let's talk about this one that you brought up. She said, my son uses an AAC device The school says they don't use the program my son uses. How do you respond to that? So, it really comes back to needs. And so, what you want to be able to do is to, talk about what your son's unique needs are. I know Renee loves that phrase, what your son's unique needs are, and that we need to have a match of a program that's going to be, helpful for your son. So, so if they would say, I'm sorry, Courtney, we have a different program that we use at school. I would say, well, I'm interested in knowing more and knowing how the school selected it, because there might be something better about the program they're using. We don't know. So before we get really angry, sometimes it's good to ask those clarifying questions. So what's the program the school uses? What's the criteria the school used? I'm trying to remember. You could say, did we discuss this at the last IEP meeting? Now, you probably have heard that schools don't like to write specific program names or instructional strategies in, in the IEP. There's nothing in IDEA that prevents them from doing that. However, that's just a practice that the school has. So for a lot of us, it's like, do I even bring up, I want Orton Gillingham? Do I even bring up that this, app from his private SLP is so much better? Um, but that can be part of the discussion. And as a parent and as a team member, it shouldn't be just left up to the SLP to make those decisions. And so, what I'm going to do, Courtney, is I have a handout that I've been putting together, and I'm going to add the questions that we have today in the handout, and that will be emailed out to everybody. So, let me put this up here. If you're not on my email list, sign up at iep.today/weekly ad tips. um, because tomorrow is Friday, tomorrow early morning, it will be in your email box. And I'll have the questions that I have as examples. Plus, I'm going to take the new questions that we get today and put it together and ship that off to you guys, email it off. um, so let me see. Do, 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 do. Oh, Anne Marie, add team training to the IEP. Yes, that is one of those delicate subjects again, right? Because unfortunately, a lot of humans don't want to kind of be told that they aren't good enough, that they need to acquire some new skills. Now, if you approach teacher training with, I don't think you're good enough, you're not going to get very far. And so, what I usually do is I talk about my experience. And I say, as a parent, when Dylan was born, I wasn't sure what to do. And it was like, yes, I was a special ed teacher, but that's with school age children. That's not with your baby with Down syndrome. I don't know what to do. And so I got information. I seeked out resources. And as a parent, I had to know that this doesn't mean I'm a bad parent. It means I want to find out some more things. And so I try to plant the seed that, we all need other help and resources. We don't know everything about everything. And teachers can be expected to know how to work with, the diversity of students they have without some extra support and training. So, yes, training can be written in the IEP. It's usually in the supplemental services and support sectors, additional aids, supplemental aids. section of the IEP. And Anne Marie, I'll put this in our handout for tomorrow, and I'll have some more specific, succinct language. Hey, Lisa, I haven't seen you in a while. She says parents have been upset that the school had legal representation present, but they were not informed in advance. Yeah, and it's one of those things that it's really important to look at the invitation that you get from the school district. And they do need to list. Sometimes most of the time, it's just the role of the person, not their name. Um, the problem is with so many virtual meetings now, we we don't get invitations that really tell us the purpose of the meeting, who all has been invited. It's just kind of the Zoom link, right? So, one, during this virtual world that we live in, is to ask for the official invitation. Sorry, I took that down there. Ask for the official invitation. And so if it's after the fact, I mean, you've gone into the conference room or into the Zoom room, and there appears an attorney that you didn't know was coming. You can do a couple of different things, and it depends on the state that you live in. So we always have to preface that, but generally, um, you can say something at the beginning of the meeting and say, I'm a little confused. I didn't know that the school district was bringing, legal representation today. I feel that that puts parents at a disadvantage, and we need to adjourn and reschedule this meeting when we can be better informed. And so again, Lisa, I'll put your statement in our handout that will be sent out tomorrow, and I'll give you a typed out response that you can use. Hey, Anne from South Carolina. She says, wow, retaliation. Yeah, and retaliation is one of those things that can be difficult to prove, as far as if you would file an Office of Civil Rights complaint for retaliation because you're been advocating for a person with a disability. But I think probably most parents have examples of where things changed after, they became more assertive. And, it can be things like, oh, you're not getting that weekly email that you used to get from the teacher. Or now all of a sudden the teacher doesn't really have time after school to talk to you. Um, different things can happen like that. But like I said, it can be pretty difficult to actually be able to, prove that during a complaint. Sarah Kennedy, how are you? My goodness, it's like I haven't seen you in so long. Oh, I know. She said so important to practice ahead of any of these with Hurdle Talk. So, parents and advocates are ready for it. We have a resource for families with deaf and hard of hearing children that might also help all families. Yes, yes, yes. It's such a neat pop up. And if you haven't been there, thanks, Sarah, for giving that link. You need to go check it out, because what is so fun is, um, and I don't know if it's like a 4x4 grid or something, but they have, different questions. Do they start with a question or a statement? I'm not sure, but you click on it and it pops open and there's a response. So yeah, especially if your child is deaf or hard of hearing, but some of those pop-ups also apply to other people. So yeah, that's definitely a great resource that you can use. Hey, Renee, what's up? She said, I add this to the parent input statement concerns. You mean as far as them having an attorney and you not being notified? Um, Let us know. And Lisa, thank you for your advocacy. I am advocating for legislation right now, the Disability Inclusive Curriculum Bill, House Bill 726. Please support Pennsylvania House Bill 726. I'd love to invite you to submit testimony as we have a hearing with Special Ed Subcommittee February 10th. May I talk to you later? Yes, just send me a DM. But we do have quite a few people from Pennsylvania that watch our show here. And also, we have some people from Pennsylvania in our Trailblazer membership group. So, Lisa, I can pass that information on to our Trailblazer group too. Cool. Thanks. Thanks. She said, yes, it's often overlooked the list who will be there or their title. Yeah. And like I said, it's just even, I think parents get those invitations, or hopefully they get them. And they don't look at them as carefully as I think we could be, because as an advocate, I want to see that official invitation. The parents, when I'm working with them, they'll be like, well, the meeting's, February 11th at noon. And I'm like, great, that works with my calendar. I said, can you send like the invitation? And it's like, well, that's what it is. It's, it tells the time and date. Well, no, but it tells the purpose of the meeting, because sometimes parents walk into an IEP meeting thinking it's for one purpose, and the district has a whole different idea. So the purpose of the meeting on that invitation is really important to look at, and the titles of the people that were invited to the meeting. Yeah, so Lisa said PA in Pennsylvania. And did you know, Lisa, my husband and I graduated from Slippery Rock State College in Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania, over on the western side. Anne says, our invitation has the titles, invited lister, but I haven't had a lawyer attend yet. Yeah, and rarely do. I mean, from the lawyers that I've worked with, I don't think many of them want to be at IEP meetings. That's not the rule that they see, but I have been in several meetings where the school wanted to bring their legal representation. And, I was there as an advocate, but I'm not, an attorney. I can't have legal representation. And in the times when that has happened, when the schools brought their attorney, luckily the parents also had an attorney that we were working with, and the attorney was able to come. But it's interesting to see how attorneys approach IEPs, but that's for another conversation. Yeah, like a bingo card. Thank you. It started as a bingo card. We don't have money for that, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So, very similar things that can apply to all of us, not just parents of kids that are deaf and blind. So thanks, Sarah. Emery says, statement, we'll start general ed time and related arts and earn more time as the year goes on. So how many people have heard something like this? Let me get a drink of water. So if you are sitting in a meeting and somebody says, we'll start with art, music, and PE, and they can earn more time as the year goes by. And then a lot of times I like to kind of play the Columbo card where you act confused. And so I'll be like, so I guess I'm a little confused because I wasn't under the impression that with IDEA that students had to, excuse me, that students had to earn their way into a general ed classroom. So, can you help me understand that? And then you stop talking. And again, you kind of put the ball in their court. Um, and sometimes there's a long silence. And I think what the district is counting on is that the parent's going to keep talking because, not that I've ever kept talking, because we have that kind of routine of like, okay, just bring it here. I got a lot to tell you about this. So instead, if we can pull back and use a different strategy, and that strategy is to to say like I'm not sure, like, can you, the other good comeback always is, can you share a copy of the state rules or regs or the federal ones that support a child having to earn their way into general education? And you stop, and it's up to them. And then, of course, you're going to continue to have dialogue about it, right? And I do have a couple slides, so we'll go through the other comments here, but then let me bring up these other slides with some of the examples. Um, Yeah, Renee was saying the curriculum such as Wilson. Yeah, for sure. She was saying, go ahead and list those specific names of programs in your parent concern letter and your parent input statement, whatever your, form calls it. For sure, you can mention them in your statement. Um, so let's go back here to these slides, because some of these will, I think, answer some of the questions. Okay, let's continue. So we don't need to write it in the IEP. Our teachers do this as best practice in our school. Now, this is something that I hear a lot, as far as being, oh, we don't need to include that. Our school does that all the time. But actually, it is important that everything, as you know, gets written in the IEP. So let's look at a couple possible responses. Now, this one is very long, and in the handout that I have for today's show, I have the link to this specific letter, but I did want to read it, so it's captured in people watching the replay or just listening to the replay will be able to have it. So this is a letter from OSEP, and OSEP is the Office of Special Education Programs in Washington, D.C., in the Department of Ed. And parents, attorneys, school district directors, teachers, whoever can write OSEP a letter and say, I'm not sure this is what my school said, or attorneys will want clarification on, on a regulation or something. So the Office of Special Ed Programs, OSEP, will write letters of guidance, and they respond to everybody. So it can take like 6 to 8 months before you hear back. But the letters of guidance aren't any kind of a legal, reading, but what they are is a strong message to school districts that this would be helpful if they decided to follow this. So let me bring this back full screen. I apologize for that little font, but I wanted you to see the whole thing. So, in the letter to Chambers, which is one of my favorite OSEP letters to use, it says the IEP team is responsible for determining what special education and related services are needed to address the unique needs of the individual child with a disability. The fact that some of those services might be considered best teaching practices or part of the district's regular education program does not preclude those services from meeting the definition of special education or related services and being included in the child's IEP. So here's the last sentence. The LEA, which is the local education agency, otherwise known as school district, must provide a child with a disability specially designed instruction that addresses the unique needs of the child that result from the child's disability and ensures access by the child to the general curriculum, even if that type of instruction is provided to other children with or without disabilities in the child's classroom, grade, or building. So, as I said, this is like one of my favorite letters of guidance. And next week, I'm going to be talking about some other top favorites because I don't think parents and sometimes other advocates know about the kind of rich resources that we can use in those OSEP letters. So next week's show is going to be devoted to that. But I like this. And Trisha, I don't know if you're watching us live today, but I remember the IEP meeting when it was, I don't know if it was the first time I used letter to chambers, but it was like I had it in my folder and it was like the perfect timing when the district was like, oh no, all of our teachers do that. That's best practice. We don't need to write that in the IEP. And, then I mean, as an advocate, I pulled it out and I said, well, from my understanding of this letter from OSEP is that even if it is best practice, if it's something that my child needs because of his disability and his unique needs, then we still need to put that in the IEP. And so all of these little things are important because what may be best practice and, oh, the school does that for everybody, might change next year when a new principal comes. Or everybody does this best practice might change when the teachers are like, no, we don't want to do this anymore. So if it's something that your child needs, even if everybody else has provided it, you still want it in your child's IEP. Okie dokie. So let's go back to some more comments and questions. So Anne Marie, this is something she's heard. She said, statement said therapy or skill isn't done at school because it's only a medical therapy. Yeah, and so do you want to be specific, Anne Marie, and say, what kind, I know different families have had a lot of success with vision therapy. Um, and I know sometimes they've asked about that. And so you do have to kind of be careful because there are some services that the school is really going to bulk, kind of put up that road barrier. So one of the things that you could look at, Anne Marie, is let me bring your statement back up here, is I would ask the school, so how do you distinguish between, educational therapy and medical therapy or school therapy and medical therapy? So again, you want to have the school district put into words what their position is and why they are saying that. So it's kind of like an oral prior written notice. And you want to get that information first before like, well, I'm going to recite this or, section 300 to 320 says. So, yeah. So I think sometimes the first response can be a question, and that can help you then know, like, oh, well, they've got, like, I don't know where they came up with this medical therapy definition, but I've never heard that before. And it's like now you have a chance to say that's why they're saying that, because they have this false belief or whatever. But we can't assume what they're thinking and what they're using as their rationale unless we ask for it. Renee says, anything else a parent needs answers to? The parent needs a detailed description of or documentation of their child's work. So are you saying, Renee, when parents ask for detailed descriptions or documentation, and if the district is saying no? I'm not sure that's if that was your point, so let me know. um, but I do, like a thing that I do with all IEPs and families that I'm working with is when we talk about progress monitoring, I always ask the parents to have included in a statement that says the information collected to perform progress monitoring, that the parent wants copies of those as often as they're being collected. So I'll make a better statement in the handout. But basically what it is if they're doing weekly, samples of your child's written language skills, then every week it would be very easy for them to make a copy of that written language sample or to snap a picture on their phone and send it to you. So I don't want necessarily the percentage, they can put that, but I don't necessarily need those percentages every week, but I want the parents getting the actual sample. So if they're doing a word list of sight words, I want the parent to be able to see these were the 20 words, these were the words that he got wrong, these, is what he said instead, these are the words he got right. Like, I want you to have that information as soon as they take it. So if it's weekly, you get it weekly. If it's every other week, you get it every other week. But it's like, it's not helpful to wait 9 weeks and get a progress report that doesn't tell you anything. And more schools are doing trimesters, so those parents are waiting usually 12 weeks. So yeah. And progress reports are like a whole nother show, right? um, hey, Michelle. Michelle's from Florida. She says it's sad that school districts spend taxpayer monies on lawyers instead of just helping our students. Oh, I know. It's amazing. It's not only the money that the district is willing to, take from taxpayers and pay for attorneys, but it's also the time that it takes staff and fighting parents versus that time could have been spent with an instructional coach and learning about co-teaching. I mean, let's take our money and let's take our time in the school system and put it in the classroom where it makes a difference. It makes a difference for kids and it makes a difference for teachers. So yeah, for sure. Yeah, and the specials are perhaps not gen ed inclusion. Yeah. I mean, I've worked recently with a couple of families, and I mean, their kids weren't even included for the typical lunch, recess, art, music, PE. And I thought that was a pretty low bar of inclusion. And to think in 2022, we still have schools that aren't even providing that amount of, ability for kids to be with each other is pretty sad. So let me go back here because we have a couple more that I think you'll be interested in. So we just don't have the funding for that service. And as Sarah had mentioned on their pop up, they do have a square that talks about funding. So here's a couple ideas of responses. So, again, starting with the question, are the services and supports we write into the IEP based on my child's needs in order to access and make progress in the general ed curriculum? Or are the services and supports based on cost? Now, again, the tone that you use is important. But it's also, I think, important to be assertive, right? And these are the kinds of questions that you already know the answer to. But again, you want some dialogue and you want the district to defend that statement that they just made. You can't let that slide by because, as I often say, what we accept continues. So, if you continue to accept the district getting away with things that you know are not right, guess what? They'll continue. So let's go back here. Now, this is another response that you might use when funding is something that the district brought up. I understand that the district has a tight budget, and my understanding is the district is still required to provide my child with a specific service, assistive technology, or other accommodation in order to meet their unique needs so they can access their education. So again, you could put, different things in here that apply to your child. So the statement that you make is like, yeah, I know things are tight. However, with all the money that was released to schools during COVID, I'm not sure your district can even say they have a tight budget anymore. But you could try to, say, yeah, I get that. But and my understanding is this is part of my child getting a free, appropriate public education is we do have to meet his unique needs. Um, so keep those in your back pocket for when you need them. Let's see how we're doing. Here's something else that you might hear often. We don't believe your child needs that at this time. So it's like they're not going to say no. They're going to maybe try to appease you because you are that parent. So let's look at some responses. It would help me understand better if you could give me your reasons for saying this and share the documentation you were using to base your belief on. So again, it's maybe a polite way, I don't know, of calling someone out. But again, it's like if they're coming from the position, no, your child doesn't need this service, and you think it's a priority need, I mean, you can't just say, oh, okay, well, maybe next year. No, 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 no. You need to come back with some kind of a response. And so, as I said earlier, if you just joined us, that I'm putting all these together in a handout. I'll be working on that tonight, and they will arrive in your email box tomorrow if you sign up at iep.today/weekly ad tips. So I have these examples in the from the PowerPoint in the handout, and I'll be adding the statements that you guys are bringing up. So keep bringing up your statements, and we'll get them addressed. Let me see. Yeah. Emery, and we have one that's similar to that coming up. So let's look here. I'm not sure if it's the next one. This is in response to the same statement, like, we don't think your child really needs that at this time. And so you could ask, do you have any suggested alternative services or supports that would help our child meet this goal or meet this unique need, whatever? Um, so it's like, okay, they don't think X needs to happen, but do they have any other alternatives? Because the need hasn't gone away. And so you're disagreeing with this service or support. What are your ideas of how else are we going to provide for my child's needs? So again, putting the onus on them that they need to be able to defend why they're denying what you're requesting. So once again, it's kind of like an oral prior written notice. And if you're in a state that's a one-party state and you can type record meetings, type record your meetings. The best one to use is otter.ai because you get the audio recording and the written transcript. Okay, let's keep going. Do you want to know more? You need to have more realistic expectations for your child. That's like when we're asking for inclusion, right? So you can respond by saying, my understanding is the IEP can't just offer a barely more than de minimis benefit to my child. Aren't we supposed to offer an appropriately ambitious program in light of my child's circumstances? So if this sounds familiar, it's from the U.S. Supreme Court decision in the Andrew F. versus Douglas County in Colorado. And districts can no longer, well, they still try, districts should not be just giving your child something that will help them make like this very minimal amount of progress and say, hey, we did our job. Instead, we are supposed to have more ambitious expectations for our children. So that's important that we also bring that up in the conversations at IEP meetings. Or how about this one? The gap is too wide between what students in the general ed classroom are doing and what your child can do. I mean, this is something that, or a variation of, is like so common. Let me know. Have you heard something like this in IEP meetings? Here's some things you could say. Is there a part in IDEA that says a child can only be supported in general education classrooms if they are performing close to what other students are doing? So, starting with a question, saying, I don't know. Is there really something in IDEA that says this? I don't think so. And again, you have to know the answer to this is no. This is opposite of what IDEA is telling us, right? And I keep losing my cursor here. Or I always like to say good news. The good news is we can adapt the content, methodology, or delivery of instruction to address the unique needs of my child so he can have access to and make progress in the general ed curriculum. So it's like, yeah, the good news is it's okay. if kids are not performing on the same level. Um, because guess what? That's why we have things like universal design for learning. That's why we have, supports that can be brought to the classroom, not having the child have to leave the classroom. So all of those are important things that you want to remember to be able to add to the conversation at your IEP meeting. Now, if you want to even be more assertive, you can say, well, I remember hearing about that court decision, and they said, the fact that a child with disabilities will learn differently from her education within a regular classroom does not justify exclusion from that environment. And so sometimes you have to kind of up the ante, and you have to show, or it's helpful to show the district that you know what you're talking about. And this is not going to be a parent that is uninformed, because you are informed and you are an advocate for your child. Um, so sometimes slipping these little court cases in the conversation can be helpful. And here's our last one. And this I hear a lot because I'm a picky, detailed person. So I've heard special ed directors say this to me a lot. It seems you want every little thing written in the IEP, and no, just what my child needs and what the district will be accountable for. And that kind of shuts down that. So sometimes it's good to have statements that just like, no, this is it, right? This is my bottom line. So we'll come back to comments. I wanted to let people know I'm, getting with the times. So I now have this universal link that you can go to, iep.today/Charmaine, and it gives you, my Facebook page here, how you can book a free call if you want to join our Trailblazer group. So this is all in one little succinct place, iep.today/Charmaine. And I'm going to stop sharing, and let's go back to your comments. Renee says, laugh out loud. I play the confusion card. Please explain how this looks. Describe what the student is doing with peers, even teaching prompts. Yeah. You really want to leave that IEP meeting or any conversation that you're having with staff at school with, like, I really understand like what this looks like, what it would sound like, how actually it's going to operate. Because otherwise we like make up these stories and pictures in our head, right? Of like, I can't believe that. But yeah, so it's not just, sometimes they count being included in general ed when a student is spending time in the hallway working with a para. And, that's kind of debatable, right? I mean, there's no other typical peers. There's no teacher presenting the, tier one, lesson for everyone. So yeah, you want to be clear about how things look. So Lissa says, yes, unique individual pain. Amen. Or plan. I think you meant plan. Renee says, give specific details, use your state's standards and benchmarks, best practices to have an IEP goal, include work samples as part of the data collection. Yeah, and for For some students that, excuse me, they might have a scribe, and so they're relaying a story and the scribe is writing it. So for those kind of situations, then what I like to do is say, like, please make a recording of my child, you know, verbally giving the story to the para that's scribing it, so I can hear his language that he's using and just, the fluency or whatever. So there are some times where, a visual work sample might not be there, but you can also do quick audio recordings on cell phones. So the invention of the cell phone is so nice for us because it's a great way for us as parents to record videos or audios of our kiddos at home. And it's a great way that teachers can share that with you also. Um, so Anne says, they told me visuals weren't needed, but I said, if we move, I need the new school teacher to know what accommodations. Yeah, that's excellent, Anne, because that's the thing. I mean, you may be moving as a family to a new district, and maybe that classroom teacher really doesn't use as much visuals as the classroom teacher did, in your previous school. So all of those details really count in your IEP. And therapy, feeding, ABA, music. Oh, some of the other medical therapies are a few I've heard of other students receiving, but not in South Carolina. Yeah, and I don't have that much experience with children needing feeding therapy. I know that's one of the concerns that you have. There are some schools that do provide ABA services at school, and it depends, right? And it can vary within your state too. But there are some districts that will contract with an agency for, sometimes they're called behavior interventionists, and that person comes to school and provides that ABA therapy and, kind of works with a child throughout the day. They're a contracted employee. Some school districts are like, no, we don't want any outside people coming in our building. So, yeah, in music therapy, and part of, I guess, what I look at too is, instead of having separate therapies, let's look at how we can use the music class in the school. Um, because if we're talking about inclusion, but then we're also looking at really um, services that are going to take your child away from being with peers, I mean, that can be a concern too. So you have to kind of be careful what you ask for. Um, if your child really responds well to music, and a lot of kids do, then I would have, some conversations with the building's music teacher and say, how can we incorporate this into some of the learning? So, the music teacher may have some songs that the general ed teacher can be singing in the class for everybody, that teach, multiplication or whatever. Or when your child comes to music class, how can we make sure that they're more engaged there? So I would look at doing something like that before I would try to request that they provide music therapy at school. But that's just me. Um, and Anne says, we've been responding to each other, so some comments aren't making sense to me, to you. Yeah, sorry, I know. It's like, are you talking about this or are you talking about this? That's okay. Hey, Susie from Georgia. She said, district responded to my request for data by saying they do not share this information. How do I get them to provide this information if they refuse? Well, those silly people. And Susie, you are a trailblazer. So I'll share with you the template that I use to request records. I don't think you need to go that official right now, but we could look at that. So I know we're looking at a time to set up a time to talk. So that could be something. Or the other thing, Susie, is our after the show is coming up in about 19 minutes in our Trailblazer group. So you could ask it there too. But yeah, um, those are part of your child's educational records. Uh, so that's something that can be shared with you. And, depending on your state, I'm not sure about Georgia. Most states will go by the FERPA rules of 45 days. They have to collect all the information, all your child's records. If you live in California, you're lucky. Because in California, if you request records, they have to give it to you within 5 days. The sneaky part is some people don't understand or realize in IDEA, it also says that you can get those records before any meeting. So it's like, yeah, FERPA gives them 45 days, but if you've got an important meeting coming up, they can give you those specific records before that meeting. So they have to give it to you. Renee says, wow, use parental rights to have meaningful parent participation. Charmaine will explain. So are you talking about at IEP meetings, Renee? And part of the whole spirit and the law is that, it's a group of people that come together. And so if you use the phrase, I need to receive this record before the meeting so I can have meaningful parent participation in the IEP meeting. And that's the other thing with virtual meetings too is, you know, so sometimes they'll have like a new draft or like a new report and it's like they haven't shared it with you and they have it at the virtual meeting and maybe they're going to put it up on the screen. It's like, no, you need to also get in the habit now, if you're having virtual meetings, to make sure that you get hard copies or electronic copies of whatever they're going to be sharing at the IEP meeting. Because again, that puts you at such an imbalance because you don't have the same documents that everybody else does. So with virtual meetings, make sure when you respond about the meeting date that you say, I also need to have all of the materials that are going to be shared, and you can give the timeline, that you want to get those back. What else? Yeah. Also, ask to see the policy, review state regs also. Yeah, your state regs make a huge difference. Abby is from Kentucky. She said last year at the IEP meeting, this was said. We don't want to provide a one-on-one person for your child forever. It's best just to go into the resource room full time now. Sorry, I'm laughing. It's like, okay, now I need to get centered, right? And so there's a few things to kind of unpack here. One is how the district sees a paraeducator being used, and are they looking back on experiences when the para might not have had training on the best way to support kids in general ed. The para might not have had training on, using prompts and how to fade prompts. The para might not have had training on how to work with a child that uses a communication device. So there's so many factors. And so sometimes people go, oh, that one-on-one para, no, that was a disaster. It didn't help at all. We're never doing that again. And it's like, well, how was a person used and what was their training? The other thing that I really recommend for parents is to look at having a classroom pair versus a one-on-one pair. And some parents are like, no, I want that person there just for my kid. But it's not beneficial for your child to have an adult Velcro to them, which is not best practice, but is what happens a lot. So you need to have that discussion about the one-on-one pair. And then also that if a child doesn't have additional help in the classroom, therefore now they have to go to the resource room full time, that's like a huge jump. But Abby, I'll put this in the handout, and I don't know if you're available in a few minutes, because then we have a after the show party in our Trailblazer group, and we could talk about it some more. Okie dokie. So here's some suggestions for Susie. It's part of student record. You're entitled to your student record. They should give you the data. Yeah. And that's why now, especially for progress monitoring stuff, I just we write it in the IEP. It's like, you do this weekly, great. Give us your examples of what you use for progress monitoring. I'm not asking you to write a formal report because they balk at that. But I am asking and requesting that this information be shared. And I think it's important to use the word request at IEP meetings. I'm requesting this. I request this. Because to me, that word request can trigger a prior written notice. So instead of saying, I would love it if there was a second communication device in the room so people could use that when they communicate with my son. I would just love it if he could be in science. It's like, well, that's great that you would love that. But people are kind of going to pass that off and dismiss it. So instead, you need to be clear. I'm requesting that there be a second communication device purchased so the teacher can communicate with my child, and so can his peers, something like that. And then if they refuse, if they deny, then you want to make sure when you get that prior written notice that they have that in there why they're denying that. Wow, thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. Yes, if this is beneficial, give us some likes or hearts. Let's see. Anne says she loves Otter. Renee loves Otter. I love Otter. We all love Otter. Yes, we heard, but he will feel left out. Yeah, no. No, 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 no. I know. It's but the good news is we have each other. We can be here for each other. And like I said, I'll be working on the rest of the handout for you and including your statements and questions here that we talked about. So make sure if you don't get my email that comes out, go to iep.today/weekly ad tips. And also know that if you want to come back and watch the replay and catch something that was like, what did she say again? Or you have friends that missed it, the replay will be up. You can give them the link. Next week, we will be talking about some of my favorite letters of guidance from the Office of Special Ed Programs at the Federal Department of Ed. That can be additional tools. I'm losing my voice. Those letters of guidance can be great tools for your advocacy toolbox. So until next Thursday, thanks so much for coming. I love the conversation. You guys are and helping each other. It's like, that's exactly what we want to be doing here, right? Because as an advocate, as a parent, I'm passionate about making sure that your child is safe, happy, and learning every day beside his friends. So Until next Thursday, you guys take care, and we will see you then.